The European Union and Mexico have expressed disappointment after President Trump said he would impose 30% tariffs on their exports to the US from August. The president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, posted on social media saying a 30% tariff on EU exports would hurt businesses, consumers and patients on both sides of the Atlantic. She added the European Union will continue working towards an agreement by August the 1st. Europe, along with Mexico, are Mr. Trump's latest targets. In 1 week, he's announced higher duties on 25 countries he says are exploiting the United States. He says these will encourage US consumers to buy more American-made goods. France's President Emmanuel Macron says he's in very strong disapproval of President Trump's announcement. If no agreement's reached, the French leader suggested the EU plans speeding up the preparation of credible countermeasures. Italy's Prime Minister, meanwhile, Giorgia Meloni, said in a statement it would make no sense to trigger a trade war between the two sides of the Atlantic, whilst the Dutch Prime Minister Dick Schoof posted on social media saying the EU must remain united and resolute in its aim to reach a mutually beneficial deal with the US. Wendy Cutler's Vice President of the Asia Society Policy Institute, she says Mr. Trump's 30% tariff on the EU took her by surprise.
My understanding is negotiations with the EU are progressing well and, frankly, progressing better than our negotiations with many other partners. So I have to believe this is some kind of either a display of Trump's frustration that somehow the deal hasn't been struck yet, or an attempt to gain some negotiating leverage, which I'm not sure it's going to accomplish. I think, if anything, it could be counterproductive.
Well, Gordon Sondland is America's former ambassador to the European Union. He told the BBC he was 100% sure the tariffs would go through.
They're going to even increase it beyond the 30% until Europe finally opens its markets wide to U.S. products and services. This is something multiple U.S. presidents have tried to do through polite talk. The Europeans have been adamant that they will not budge on agriculture, they won't budge on cars, they won't budge on GDPR. And now it's going to be a game of chicken because Donald Trump is equally adamant, I should say, that he wants the US to have complete access to the European market. If Europeans don't want to buy our products, that's fine. That's up to the consumers. But the access is important to the United States.
Well, meanwhile, Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum called the tariffs unfair, but said Mexico would continue negotiations and is optimistic a trade deal can be reached. It's America's biggest trading partner, and the neighbours are tied by a free trade agreement. Our Mexico correspondent Will Grant assesses what could happen next.
There is a bit of a sense of déjà vu when it comes to tariffs and Mexico. Mexicans feel like so far it sort of unfolds like this. President Trump threatens tariffs. President Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico calls for calmer heads to prevail and for everybody to hold their nerve. And then at the 11th hour, the two sides get around the negotiating table and tariffs aren't, by and large, put in place. Now, that is the sense on the Mexican side. And certainly, President Sheinbaum has again come out and urged calm among the Mexican people. She said, for example, that there are things that the two sides can work together on, but some things aren't negotiable, specifically issues of Mexican sovereignty. She said that the two sides had established a working group and that the letter from Donald Trump, a letter she said he'd sent to countries around the world, was pushing for that in order for there to be cooperation, because once there's cooperation on the certain elements that he's underlined, specifically the drug cartels in Mexico, creating a situation that he said was turning North America into a narco-trafficking playground, that once they can work on those issues in the working group and the diplomats, then they can prevent tariffs from being imposed. So she was giving a sort of upbeat outlook and believes that the two diplomatic teams can reach an agreement to prevent tariffs from being imposed. Mexicans feel like they've seen this movie before, and we have to wait and see if on this occasion it'll be any different. If this time the Trump administration does follow through and impose tariffs on the 1st of August of 30% on all Mexican goods. Now, considering that Mexico sends more than half of the fruit that is consumed in the United States, around 2/3 of the vegetables, not to mention car parts, electronic goods. It would obviously have a huge impact on both economies, particularly if Claudia Sheinbaum put in place reciprocal tariffs. So far, they've staved off that situation from happening. We'll have to see whether or not they're able to do it this time around too.
Well, our North America correspondent Ursula now assesses what the chances are of a deal being done before President Trump's August deadline.
Well, both Mexico and the European Union have expressed a desire and hope that they should be able to see some sort of an agreement by the 1st of August. But in response to Donald Trump's letters, Mexico has called it an unfair deal, while the European Union has said that this is going to have a detrimental impact on transatlantic supply lines. Now, specifically talking about the relationship between the US and the European Union when it comes to trade, well, there was a lot riding on that and a lot of expectations from that, given the fact that the European Union happens to be the single largest trading partner for the US. So they were hopeful that there would be something mutually beneficial to both sides that could be worked out. But negotiations have proved to be very difficult over the past couple of months. If you'd recall, Donald Trump had earlier threatened 20% tariffs on the European Union, and then he expressed impatience at the pace of those talks and then threatened to increase those tariffs to 50%. After that, you had a few phone calls from both sides. There was a lot of polite talk, and then they said that, look, they were looking forward to making progress on this as well. But here we are, almost in the middle of July, and yet there hasn't been any kind of announcement when it comes to progress on that deal. The message from the White House has been very clear: to keep up that pressure in hope that this pressure yields results in the form of these trade agreements with various countries. But just look at the response that you got from the European Union earlier on Saturday. They made it very clear that, look, we want to have a deal as well by the 1st of August, but we also need to protect the interests of the European Union. And if that means then we need to go ahead and impose proportionate countermeasures, well, then so be it. So that's where we are at the moment. It's that last stretch before the 1st of August, whether they can hammer something out. Well, that's something that we need to see, whether the pressure is going to yield results or whether we're looking at the potential of this opening up something even more complicated, where you see a retaliatory tit for tat having global trade ramifications.
Ursula there in Washington.